Hi there, I'm Frances Waterman O'Connell, Safe and Inclusive Schools Consultant with the Nova Scotia Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. The title of our session is called The Journey Continues, Preparing for School Through Relationships. I will be presenting along with my colleague Tracy Devereaux. If you had reviewed the previous sessions, you would have received information on trauma-informed care and coping with uncertainty and change, as well as working through your fears. We would like to acknowledge that our journey still continues in our current reality with COVID-19. We would like to provide you with some information that you can use when navigating through this change. The Back to School plan speaks of wellness as a priority for all. We know the importance of relationships and communications when working together that contributes to wellness and well-being. Our objectives are as follows: understanding relational theory, understanding the restorative approach, and exploring strategies and practices that support positive well-being and relationships with your child. When we speak of the importance of connection and inclusion, we are speaking of the ancient histories of the Indigenous peoples. The Back to School plan has a focus on the understanding of the word kinu. This slide speaks of the word kinu. It is a Mi'kmaq word that means all of us, inclusive. Some highlights of the slide include meaningful partnerships with all students and their families. It also pays particular attention to reaching out to students who were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and the school closures, understanding the gaps of learning in our students, your children, and moving forward together and valuing students, your children, as holistic beings. I now pass this on to Tracy, who will continue with the presentation.
Hi, I'm Tracy Devereaux. I'm the Restorative Approaches in Schools Coordinator for the Restorative Initiatives Unit at the Public Safety Division of the Department of Justice. As we start to think about relationships, I can't help but think to Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you did. I will learn that people will forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel." So as we enter into relational theory, in North America, the social factors that contribute to well-being are in decline. There has been a steady decline in nearly all things social apart from social media. At no time in our history has this decline come to a halt the way it has with COVID-19. You as parents have experienced your children not being able to spend time with their friends, and the only interaction they've been able to have is through social media. Increasing the social connections in our lives is probably the single easiest way to enhance our well-being. Being able to create situations for your children to reestablish those connections is of utmost importance for us as they return back to school. Our educators are dedicated to wanting to be able to establish an opportunity for your children to be able to experience that, to be able to feel welcome, to be able to reconnect with their peers and their teachers. We know how important those relationships are. Mounting research shows that students who feel connected to school, to teachers, to other students, to the school itself, do better academically. Enhancing these connections will bridge the transition to academics. Our educators are prepared to spend the time, to create the opportunities, to allow your students to be heard. What we ask from our parents is that you encourage your students to take advantage of that opportunity, to have them be comfortable to speak about how they felt, to speak about how they feel about coming back to school, to be able to express that and have our educators respond and take that information to move forward. Relational theory holds that as human beings, we live in and are constituted by relationships. Working with the most marginalized of our society, this has cemented this concept for me. For 13 years, I worked with the 1% of the population that does 90% of the crime. And during that time, I realized the importance of developing relationships, of developing trust, developing mutual respect. What we want from parents is the opportunity for them to encourage their students to develop those relationships with their educators as they return back to school. This brings me to the concept of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is an African philosophy, and it's translated as, I am who I am because of who you are. There was an anthropologist who had been there in Africa with this particular tribe, and he decided to play a game. So he took a basket of fruit and put it at the end of the field, and he said to the students, whoever gets there first, whoever wins the race, gets the basket of fruit. So when he started the race, all the students joined arms and ran together. And when they got there, they sat down and enjoyed the fruit together. When he asked about why that happened, the students said, I am because we are. I am because we are. As we return back to school, this is the concept we want to see happen for our students. We want our students to understand that they are just as much a part in that school. Their contribution is just as valued, and that they have that opportunity to make sure that they are heard. I will now pass it over to Frances.
Thank you, Tracy. This graphic that's presented is an idea adapted from The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek, which speaks of the why, the how, and the what. The why is where we begin, our purpose, our cause of the belief. It connects to our emotion and our decision making. The why is very powerful. The how is understanding our approach or behavior to our why, also connected to our emotions. The what is understanding the list of action items that we carry through. And in this case, our why is the relational theory, our how is restorative approaches, and our what are the practices that we will carry forth. The why, being relational theory, speaks to we understand that our relationships matter. There are many different relationships. Staff to student, your child to student, your child with another student, staff to staff, parent to child or caregiver to child, parent to parent or caregiver to caregiver, child to child, family to family, community to community. We need to pay particular attention on how we organize these relationships, whether we're at home, and pay attention to how they are in school. We need to also understand the ripple effect that relationships do have. Our how is the restorative approach, and this is where we speak of relational practices of practice that you will learn about later with Tracy. And our what is how the restorative approaches works through everyday practice. Some examples where you might have restorative approaches are, and I'll read, having any type of interviews that happen within the school or within places in the community or even within your home. We wouldn't necessarily call it interviews, but questioning. Having meetings, community building, gatherings where you're sharing and you're learning information, exchanging information, decision making, reintegration circles. So if you are a parent or caregiver that is working on reintegrating your child, this is where a restorative approach would benefit. Welcoming circles and problem-solving gatherings, which we would see a lot of when we are interacting or when you are interacting with schools and educators, keeping the students at the forefront. I now will pass this on to Tracy, where he will be speaking of restorative principles for practice.
Thank you, Francis. So now as we delve into the restorative principles for practice, there are 7 principles that we talk about when we talk about taking a restorative approach and what those restorative principles for practice are. These principles are not separate, but rather they're intertwined as well as interdependent. The first of the principles is relationally focused, understanding and seeking to structure/support just relationships. Focus on relationships, a way of looking at things to check what's connected here for us. Not focusing on just one individual. Focus on the connections as your mode of analysis, as a way of thinking about what is going on here. We are working constantly toward creating just relationships because things change. Striving to maintain levels of trust and respect, creating safe spaces for students to contribute, share, and learn. Prior to coming to the Restorative Initiatives Unit, I spent many years teaching the most marginalized community. And the last couple of years, I spent teaching at the Central Nova Scotia Correctional Facility. At that time, I remember teaching a communications class, and I had a student, gentleman in his 30s, say to me, "You know, it's pretty bad that I had to come to jail to feel respected in a classroom." And as I thought about that after he had gone back to the range, I thought about how was his school experience structured that caused him to feel this way? How was it structured in a way that he felt that he was not respected? As educators, we need to really work on establishing these relationships and fundamentally knowing that not just the matter of having a good relationship with a student, but having a just relationship, a relationship where that student can convey their needs and knowing that we are responding in a way of moving forward to help address those needs and provide them an opportunity for them to contribute, to share, and to learn. It's not about individuals. This is not focusing on one particular person. It's about the collective. The next principle is being comprehensive, holistic, and integrative. It's connecting the dots between issues, incidents, contexts, causes, and circumstances. Working in an integrated way, not a siloed and fragmented way. As we know, preparing to go back to school, I know the time I've spent working with various departments in government over the summer, having these conversations, that there has been an opportunity for there to be a breakdown in silos, less fragmentation, where we're actually focusing on the student, focusing on the child, and being able to see all the supports that can come in to help that person do well. Thinking about things relationally means starting to map connections. Connecting an incident to its context and its causes, or the people involved, and connect it. Having that opportunity for our students to be able to contribute in that classroom, for everyone to be heard, and collectively for them, along with their teachers, to be able to come up with outcomes. That connection is really important. As we see in this thing, we have this connection between parent and teacher and student and that line of communications. We want to ensure that communication line always stays, so that the message from you is the same message that comes from the teacher, so our children are hearing the same message both at home and in the school. The next principle is inclusive and participatory. And this is the part where we look at empowering that first voice. This is the part where we focus on being trauma-informed, that we're culturally aware, and that we're needs-based. It's important to be inclusive, to figure out who has been or is affected. Having that opportunity for our young people to be able, again, to have that voice, to be able to tell their story in a way where they feel safe and comfortable in that classroom. So in this slide, we see this young person talking about why you do it. What you do, how you think impacts me. And we have our educators talking in ways of saying, let's try. I agree, and can add that with, yes, positively impacts our students. And we can even. Offering opportunities for that student to know that they're a contributing part within that classroom. Providing that first voice, that cultural awareness, building those bridges, generating information based on needs. The next principle is responsive. Being contextual and flexible practice. Informed by data. Listening to the needs of our students and responding to those needs. Investigating the data that can help affect progress. Lasting changes to the system. Broader system changes as a result, and how we analyze the data. What we're encouraging for our educators is to, if we're working in a restorative way, it's collecting that data and what we actually do with that data that we collect over the course of the year, and how can that information help us to know that we're on the right path and that we're moving in the right way. And we want to see this applied. Next is focused on individual and collective responsibility. Shared responsibility for supporting student and class success. Much of this comes from that concept of a community value to protect all individuals. What will it take for all of our students to be successful in that classroom? What do our educators need to do to make sure that all of our students are able to feel successful in our classrooms? And we know this comes from modeling behavior, that educators actually acknowledging the human rights lessons that carry forward for our young learners, seeing things, not being able to ignore incidences, to bring them forth and to model the behavior that we want to see from our students. Collaborative and non-adversarial. There is no us versus them. It's simply we. Getting to the root cause and working collaboratively to create outcomes. Our students being accepted. Students being listened to among each other. And as parents, we want to be able to have you encourage that to happen, to know that it's a safe place, that our educators are there to provide a safe place for our students to be able to speak. And finally, forward-focused. Educative problem solving, preventative and proactive. The purpose to address either the harms to relationships or things in a relationship or connection that are not going well. Sometimes things don't go well, and we need to learn from that and to move forward. It's at this time that I think of the restorative inquiry into the Home for Colored Children and the use of the Sankofa as a talking piece and a guiding piece for the process that took place. And the Sankofa is a bird with its feet pointed forward and its head turned around with an egg in its mouth facing backwards. And understanding that concept of that, you know, it's okay to go back. It's okay to look back, but we're not looking back to settle some account or to ascribe blame on something. We're looking back to learn, to say, how do we move forward? How do we take this knowledge that we've had and how do we progress? And having our students be able to witness that and experience that and seeing that modeled and hopefully displaying those attributes themselves. The importance in this slide comes from focusing. We need to be able to focus in on our students, your children. They are the pinnacle. They're the reason we're there. We want to be able to create that opportunity where they feel safe, where they feel contributing. That's what we're shooting for. I'll pass it over to Frances.
Thank you, Tracy. As you have just heard the importance of focusing and the principles of restorative approach in practice, this slide shows about the benefits in being focused on building relationships and what it allows you. It allows you to be present and in the moment, so when you're having those conversations with those people that are at the table, be present and remove the chaos or the distractions, if only for a moment. Listen attentively, erases the distraction. See the person that's in front of you. Provide clarity for solution-based thinking, and have less conflicts. This is a statement that I will read. Relational theory has significant implications for our thinking about schooling, moving us from traditional conceptions of schooling to a different way of thinking about schooling. And we've all been impacted on the non-traditional way of schooling by COVID-19, where it was beyond our control. When we look at the statement again from an educator's lens, this would include the practices that we're welcoming your children and we're giving them first voice. We're also allowing for them to share what they know and then to bridge what they know for the outside world. The next slide speaks of the benefits of using restorative approaches for students, staff, parents, and caregivers. And you will see under your section that a lot of the material that is here is similar to students and education staff. And the reason being is because we must remember that it is a collective responsibility of all. I will highlight some things. So using a restorative approach allows your voice to be heard as the parent, and it will also allow your child's voice to be heard, as well as allowing the education staffs. The skill sets of problem solving will evolve, so the more practice that your child has with the restorative approach, the more they will become accustomed to how to resolve conflict. Leadership development is also a benefit that you will have when using the restorative approach. You will see that leadership development will evolve even with your children. Gradual release of responsibility for conflict resolution. When we speak of the gradual release of responsibility, of course, it starts with you being the model of the restorative approach. And when your child is in that situation where they're using restorative approach, you will see that they will be able to use it without you, giving that gradual release of responsibility of the conflict resolution. And I think when we speak about reduction of stress over everything that has happened over the course of COVID-19, restorative approaches does alleviate some of the stress when coming together, because we know that it is the groundwork of communicating and establishing positive relationships, and most important, allowing that first voice. These are some strategies that you can use. You can add it to your toolkit that you can have when looking at a restorative approach. To make room for everyone in the home. So everybody that is present in your space, to make sure that they understand that they have value and they have a lot to contribute to make the family bubble, however that looks, as effectively run as possible. That's also lends to creating that physical and emotional space. And some keys of success for that is when the people that are in your space, in your family bubble, will express how they feel, what is going on, and asking for help. Sharing responsibility and leadership in the home. You don't have to take the leadership all on your own. Sometimes we allow our children to take on some leadership roles, whether they be big or small. I would start small and then gradually release more leadership on your child. You'd be surprised of how much that they can accomplish. Share different ways of communication. This will also help with yourselves and the children, and also help with the children when they go back to school. What I mean by this is that we are following our public health measures where, for example, wearing a mask, When we wear a mask, it makes it very difficult for us to see the full understanding of a nonverbal message. And so it would be good to have these conversations with your child and understanding what are some different ways that we can communicate a greeting. Create a gratitude wall or a shared journal to be used in the home. So when your child and yourself are having conversations either at the end of the day or during the day, to store those memories, those gratitudes, those special situations that have happened throughout the day and record them. You can record them in a form of a picture or a video, a log, or you can write them in a journal and have that a shared journal. And this will also decrease the stress within the home so that someone can come and review that journal. You can do it together or you can do it separately, but to place it in an area where all of the family members can read through it. Provide the message to your home that school and the people in the home are working together and on the same team. And just please note, we're all in this together, and that everyone can help. And sometimes with our younger ones, it may be nice to have those conversations to pinpoint those in the school that could help them. Validate feelings in the space and let your child know that we all will work together with them to be successful. And also ask the question, what will it take for your child to be successful in home and successful in school in learning? Model positive behavior and language. We all know that our children will watch what we say and what we do. Share with your child that some answers will take time to find, but we can get started. We can move on, and we will always revisit to see if we can seek those answers out. Allow your child to share feelings about going back to school, and stick with the facts of COVID-19, and do not engage in the speculation that social media sometimes bombards us with. Ask your child, what will they need in order to make themselves feel that they're in a good space? Always absorb the humor. We know that our children can be quite humorous at times, and so absorb that humor. Make a list of what you can do together as a family that is more positive, more fun. Practice separation from the home. Sometimes children have a hard time in separating from home, going back to school, especially since they have been with you since the spring. So practicing, maybe going for a walk to the school or having conversations with older children, ask them how they feel about separating from the home. Work through that together. If there's a town hall being offered from your school, or if the teacher is offering a time where they are going to introduce themselves and let the viewers see what it is that they are going to expect, I would encourage that you engage in that town hall. I would encourage that you engage in that opportunity to become reacquainted with the school, as this is a new way of learning. And most importantly, allow these shared stories. You have shared stories, your children have shared stories. Allow them to happen. The stories that we have been told help create our own identity as adults. So the stories that your children will have will help create their identity, and the stories that you give will help create their identity. This graphic shows that when a child does not have the opportunity to tell their story, especially in the school or in the home, it leaves for them to have a homogeneous type of mind and a way of thinking, and little room for exploration and engagement. That is the graphic on the left. The graphic on the right is what we strive to have in our children. We want them to hear the stories. We want them to hear your stories that you have to pass along to your children. When they hear these different stories at home and at school, it invites exploration, self-initiative to explore, inquire, and be grateful of the differences that impact the positive society that they will be growing up into. We also can't forget that You could have a child that's experiencing some developmental trauma. Please know that our educators, we do understand that we have different folks that come to us, and we do the best to prepare. The graphic that you see is on trauma and brain development. You will see two triangles. One is typical development of the brain and one is developmental trauma. In the typical development, you will see the largest part of the brain is overcome by cognition and that higher order of thinking. As you work down, the smallest piece of that triangle is survival. In a developmental traumatic situation, survival significantly increases and cognition significantly decreases. We know that there are situations where people have gone through developmental trauma. Our job as educators is to acknowledge and to provide a way where we are generating enough information where we can support those that come forth to us, whether it be parents or children. And we do this by listening to your stories, sharing possibly our own stories, communicating, being present, and genuinely interested. And this will help unlock some information that will help better understand that connection. Sometimes going to the school or speaking to your child will have difficult moments. And I always say that just follow what Siri does. When you hold that button a little longer on your phone, your iPhone, Siri would come up and say, "What can I help you with?" When you do not answer, Siri will continue and say, "Go ahead, I'm listening." So those are two prompts that you can begin to have the conversations that you need to have with your children or anyone that is in the school. And remember, we as parents, we need time for ourselves to do what makes us happy. So reward yourself. This graphic shows some different ways of showing some different things that you can do to make yourselves happy. At the end of the day, you deserve it. And at the end of the day, when your child returns back to you, they will have stories to tell. They will be happy to be back into their own family bubble, and they would like to share with you about their classroom family bubble and all the new learnings that they have received while in school. I will now pass the presentation on to Tracy.
Teacher and parent, a child's strongest advocate. We're all in this together. We work hard to embed practices that create safety every day. Feeling safe, valued, and affirmed creates effective learning spaces for all to be engaged in. The work around this can be complex. We thank you for the work you continue to do, the positive, creative thoughts you share, keeping the students first in their learning journey and social and emotional development. We thank you for trusting us with your students. We thank you for being there when they come home. We thank you for encouraging them to have the strength to speak, to talk, to feel respected. We wish you the best in this upcoming fall, a successful year, and we look forward to getting through this together. Thank you so much.
So we have some resources here that we feel that may help you, and they're resources within our region that can support you. I wish you a wonderful year with your children and with your family and building positive relationships with your school. Take care.